Welcome back to my studio. Today is day 2. Hopefully your painting is dry and you put in the angel and doorway and the snips that we need to do today. If you see here, I have an angel drawn in here. This is an angel that I've used in a number of my paintings. The reason I picked this angel is because it's very simple and basic. We're just going to lay down an angel here, and my main purpose is to show you how to make it look transparent and make it look ethereal. And the best way to do that is any object has a light and a dark side to it. And that's what makes an object. You shadow from the light side to the dark side, and that gives you a solid object. With angels, because we're trying to make it look transparent, what we're going to do is we're going to show the highlights and not the dark side of it. Actually, the dark side is when we don't touch it. So first, let's grab our 1/4 inch square brush here, and we're going to grab it into the white. And at this point, we're not going to use liquid. We're just going to draw around to where we need to go, kind of an outline. So we're going to grab some paint, not a whole lot, again, just enough that we need. And we're going to start putting in the lighter areas. Now this is his forehead here, and you can see I'm putting some paint in, but it's not real thick. All I'm doing is just following my outline. And make sure you don't put too much paint. You can always add more, but if you put too much on, then it's going to be hard to blend this all out. And we are going to blend this to make this look real. And let's put in the nose. The light is hitting the tip of his nose. This part of his neck is showing up, but as you can see up into the picture up here, that part of the neck is a little bit darker than the light part here. So we don't want to put in straight white because that's going to be a little bit too much to get out. So what I'm doing is down here, I'm putting in the white where it's going to be the brightest, and then once I start running out of paint, you can see it's starting to dry out, then I'll come in and put in a little bit of that, just to see how it's a different intensity here. That'll give that the neckline, but we still got white up in here. But we're going to sharpen this up as we go along. Right now we're just doing the basic laydown. Okay, a little bit more white paint. Again, now we're going to do the wing part up here. Now again, as you can see in this picture right up here, this part of the wing is dark, so we're not going to paint that. This part here is the bright part. All of this, of course, is bright. This wing over here is bright. But this wing is in the shadows. Whoops. And this wing here is in the shadows, as well as this area and part of his hair. So anything that's in the shadows, we are not going to paint. So just grab a little liquid, a little bit of paint. And again, not too much liquid. You don't want it too wet because we are going to be smoothing this out, and it'll just take away what we lay down here. So here. A little bit more liquid again. Just not too much liquid. Just enough to get it a little damp so it's not completely dry like when we were etching this out. And now we're going to hit this wing area here, which as you look up over here, you can see that it's nice and bright. But we're going to paint in this whole area pretty solid. Just laying this color in. This is going to be pretty solid, so this will be fine. So before we go further, let's smooth this area out. Now, when we do that, it's smoothing just like we did with the clouds. We're going to take our big brush, and what we're going to do, just like with the clouds here, we're going to lightly hit it just to knock everything back to make it uniform, one shade. Like right in here now, you can see where it's a little bit lighter, a little bit darker. We're going to knock it back to make it all into one shade. And then from that point, then we hit it a little bit harder to blend it out, just the same way we did with the clouds. So let's go back and forth on this. Again, just very lightly. All you want to do is just get one even tone out of that. And if you hit it lightly, you won't move that paint any further than it is. You're just moving the paint inside, back and forth to get an even tone on it. So let's just hit that. And again, just the edge of the brush, just to get it kind of knocked back and looking like an even tone on here. Okay. Now we do the same thing on where we have the face here. Again, just use the edge of this brush and just start blending some of that out. We want to get it so that all of this, the white we just laid down here, is all pretty much evened out to one even tone. And the same thing with this part here. And up here. Now, it looks like I'm hitting it hard, but I'm not. I'm just hitting it just to blend it out to get that even tone. Okay. Now, what we should do at this point, just to give you an idea, let's take the larger brush we have, the 3/4 inch flat brush, and what we're going to do is we're going to hit the lighter area. Remember I talked about the negative painting? Let's throw in some negative painting here to start getting some form so we know where we're going with this. Okay, the negative painting is, again, like I said, we are not painting any shadows. We're just painting the highlights. That'll give us that transparent look of this angel. So to show the shadows, like where this wing right here comes down, we need to paint this background a little bit lighter. We're not going to go full white because we don't want to just whiten it out. We have clouds back here. But a little bit of lightness will start showing where the dark area of the wing is. And the same thing on this. We're going to be hitting this white area, leaving this alone, the dark part, and that'll make it look like the wings in shadow, even though you're seeing through and you're seeing the clouds that are here. You'll see what I'm talking about. Now for this, we need to take some liquid, and you might want to get it a little bit wetter than what you were doing normally, because we are going to blend this out real smooth. Not like this here where we just knocked it back a little bit. We're going to really blend this out so we don't see where we put the paint in. It just looks like it's lighter. So grab some of your liquid, some of the white paint. You don't want it real wet, but a little bit more wet than what we were using before. Okay, and follow the edge of that wing, but we're going to paint this side, not the wing itself. So here, I'm just going to go follow this edge, that. So that's basically where we're starting from. We're going to come down here. Now, without grabbing any more paint, just start grabbing that and start pushing it, pulling it back. Yeah, we don't want a lot of paint here because we're not really we don't want to cover up the clouds we've got here. We just want a thin layer of lightness to give this the appearance of a dark shadow. So just take it, even if a lot of times what I do instead of even painting it, I'll rub it. And that will also get rid of a lot of the harshness that's up there. Just kind of grab from that point and move it back away from it so you're fading it out like this. And just keep working it all the way out to where you're blending it completely out of sight. We are going to blend this a little bit better, but right now we want to get a head start. So take your brush. Like I say, I'm rubbing this. I'm grabbing a little bit of the paint that's here and rubbing it to where it just thins out gradually out of sight here. Okay, now take your big brush again, and now we're going to blend this down and knock it down just like we did with the clouds. So it just blends nice and smooth right out of sight. The key to this is, again, we're going to be blending from here out. Don't blend back into the dark wing that we're doing here. So take your brush, and again, go real lightly at first. You can always add more pressure if you want to. Start off light and you won't lose your detail. Okay, once you get it pretty well blended, you can come back in a little bit because there's not that much paint to move back and forth. So now I'm hitting a little bit more to blend it really good. You want it to have the appearance of like what's showing up here, like there's a dark part of the wing, but you still want some of that cloud showing through. So you want to knock that back as much as possible without losing the edge of that wing. Just about like that. Okay, that looks good. Now let's do the same thing up here. Now for this part, because we have a white wing here, even though in the picture you can see we have a white part of the wing, then a dark line, and then the white back here again. Because we're actually showing this, I'm not going to bring that white all the way up like it is in this picture here. I'm going to hit the back side of his head to give that a shadow look just like we did here. But when it comes up here, I'm not going to go back in there because you already have a definition showing that part of the wing. So again, just take a little bit of that white. We don't need a lot. We don't have a lot of space here we're going to be hitting. But keep in mind, we also have where we drew in the dark part of this wing here. Now that we will need to show. So just come in, just outline what you're doing first. Here's the wing. Now we're coming up to his hair, and hair comes about here. So if you outline it, and then this part up here, we're going to come in and hit this just like that. Okay, now do the same thing again. Start filling it in and blending it out. If you have too much paint on your brush, just take a little bit off because you want at this point you want to get it just thinned out enough to where there's a distinction between the shadow and the background, but you don't want a lot of paint white like you have up in this area. So just start grabbing it and start knocking it back into the dead zone here. And again, once you've got that laid in, then start hitting it back with this. And again, it's just very lightly. Try to work it mostly into the white area, not into the shadow, until it's thinned down enough. Then you go back and forth because there's very little there to blend. Okay, now we're starting to see how it's taking shape. And it looks transparent. You're seeing where the shadow is, you're seeing through it. And that gives that appearance of the transparent. Okay, so now let's work on his robe coming down here. And we'll get down to the door. Keep that clean because we're going to throw a door in here. And this is the dark side of the door. This is the light side. So we're coming down. We're going to do this area up in here. And some of this down here, fade this out. And we're going to do all this white area up in here. Grab some liquid, a little bit of light, white. Again, if you start getting too much paint, take some of that paint off. And if it's too much and you've got in like right in here, this can work out, but I probably want to take a little bit out. I got a little bit too much going in here. Just take a paper towel. Just take a paper towel and then just start taking some of that out. See, now it looks good, but it's not too much in there. And keep your brush. I would dry it at this point and just give it a head start on working down. This is the shoulder. So just work from here. This is the lighter part. And just go back and forth till you start blending it completely out. And go up to the door. You want to keep that pretty clean on that part. Once you've got that laid in like that, again, take your big brush, and again, lightly go over that. Okay, now when you're getting to a point like this door right here, now we want a nice sharp edge on this door, but we have to blend this smooth. We don't want that all roughed up. We want to smooth it out like everything else is getting nice and smooth. So to smooth that, we're going past the edge of the door. Here's what you do. Smooth that out. Don't worry about the door edge as long as you can see it. Just keep smoothing that out. Once we're done, like this, let me show you. Okay, we smooth this out, we get it. Okay, that's where I want it. But I've got some of it here. Okay, now come in, clean out your brush completely. Get all the white paint off of it. And get it damp. You don't want it wet. You do not want this wet. You want it damp from the paint thinner. Okay, you want all the paint off and you want it damp, but you don't want it wet. Once you get it damp, it feels dry, but of course it's going to be a little damp because you just dipped it in the paint thinner. Once you get it feeling dry, then come back and cut this area out. You'll see what I'm talking about here. Now I can come back in and cut a nice, clean, straight edge. Come down with the same thing here. You just take all of that right out. And that's how you can do a lot of this stuff here. If there's an area where you need it to have to be smoothed out, but it has to be a sharp area as well on one edge of it, then smooth this out and come back in and cut into, where you want to take out, but do it with a damp brush that was dipped in turpentine. Okay, now that we've got this, let's work on the wing back here. And a little bit of liquid, a little bit of white. And let's finish this wing off here. Okay, now we want to give a little bit of a break where we have his shoulder here. So when you start putting it in, make sure you know come right up to the edge, or otherwise the shoulder goes right into the wing as all in one. So it come right down to where the wing is. Now this is going to be just the opposite of what we did here. Here where all the wing part was, we did the back side. Here we're doing the positive side of it, where the white, because the light's shining on this part. And as you can see, when I put down the paint on here, I'm not putting a lot of paint. It's not like a big glob of paint, because if I did that, I'd be fighting it all day long trying to move that paint around. We want it to be thin. That'll give you the appearance of the transparent angel that we're doing here. So you put some paint down here, but it's not a big glob of it. And again, if you have too much, take a paper towel and take it off. Or take it like I'm doing right now and just move it in the other area that you're going to need. More. Now when we get up into this area over here, we're getting into the lighter part of the painting. So we're going to need to get a little bit more white to bring the distinction between the edge of that wing and the background, which is already light. And once it starts fading out on its own, don't worry about it. That's fine, because that'll give it even more of an appearance of light shining through something transparent. So let's grab a little bit of the wings that's up here. Some of this right there. Up here. Okay, once you get your edges put in, then you can start working back towards the middle here. Okay, and as you see in the picture that's up here, that these edges are a lot lighter and it's darker inside here. So as you're working your way in there, just go less and less until you're not putting any paint down, because it is getting darker in that area. So basically it's just like that. And again, try to leave a little edge around where the shoulder is, just so we don't lose that shoulder line that's in there. Okay, once we have that in, then again, take your big brush and smooth this back. Just like we smoothed this going that way, we're going to smooth this on the positive side. So grab and again, I'm just using the corner. It looks like I'm hitting with the whole brush. I'm actually just hitting the corner until I knock it down really good. Then I may use the whole brush to knock everything back a little bit more transparent. And you want to work your way from here inward, not outward, because now we're doing the positive side of the wing, rather than here we're doing the negative side. So now we're getting in the angel. Now if you want to get a little bit more, like you wanted this stain just to be a little bit more pronounced, a little brighter, you can do that without losing any of the transparency, as long as you don't touch the dark parts. You leave them alone, and it still looks like a transparent angel. Right now it's kind of on the light side. We may want that, or if we want to come back in and throw some more paint down, we can do that. Let's hit a couple of areas just to give you an idea of what you're doing. When you do that, however, because we're smoothing stuff out, we already mixed in paint with liquid on, like, say, his shoulder part here. So now if we want to brighten this up a little bit brighter, like the white rope that's up here, just use the white paint without the liquid. If you mix it with the liquid, now you've got it wetter, and instead of laying paint on top of this, you're going to start taking paint away, because that liquid is going to be, it's very watery, and it's going to start mixing, and you'll be actually taking paint off of the canvas rather than adding onto it. So if we're going to make this a little bit brighter, and let's do that just to show you, do it with just paint without the liquid. Again, not a lot, but make sure that it's basically dry without liquid on here. So I'm just taking the white paint, getting a little bit on my brush, and I'm just coming back in here. Now once I've got it pretty much laid in, then come back with your big brush and smooth that back. Now it brings that shoulder out a little bit more, and let's go hit maybe this part because that's a little faded on here. Let's go back with that. Again, no liquid, just regular white paint. Hit that. Okay, and let's hit a little bit more on his face up here. I'll grab a little bit of the white, and we're going to come in. back, get it nice and smooth. Now also we have one little area right up in here on the other side. We're showing the dark side of his face here and just the tip of that wing that's down there. So we have to hit that area. Let's just come in, whoops. Let's come in here and just, not too much paint because this part is not as bright as the rest of it. You can see that little tip. So you don't want a lot of paint that's on your brush, just a little bit. But we do need to make the distinction on his face here. So let's come up in here. Okay, so that's a pretty good lay down on the angel part that's here. You can always come back and add a little bit more. My suggestion is to give it a pretty good coating of what you want, and then at that point let it dry, and then tomorrow you can come back in and just go over whatever areas you want a little bit lighter. Alright, let's go into the door now. Okay, now for the door, what we're going to do is, again, we're going to leave this open. We're not going to hit this white because it's the shadow part. But we want to make a distinction between this shadow and the shadow of the angel. And that's where Payne's gray comes in. Let's do the white first. When we hit the white, we're going to put the white in here. We'll do some steps. Then we're going to come back to the door to pop that. We're going to hit Payne's gray. Payne's gray is an incredible color. It actually doesn't have any color. It's black, but there's a element in it that it takes whatever color you have on top. In other words, if I have a red apple against a green carpet, and I take Payne's gray and put it over that whole area, it'll actually make a dark red and a dark green all on its own. It's amazing how it works. You'll see how it works with this. For right now, let's get the white door where it's shining through. This is an open door here. This is the doorway. So the light is going to be shining through here, and it's going to be hitting the steps that we're going to be going into. So again, take your 3/4 inch brush and some white, and we'll start laying in the doorway. Once we have it pretty much laid in, as we have it right now, and come back in with your brush and knock it back. Now again, on this, just like we did with the face and the wings here, when we start knocking it back to try to get this as an even, solid tone, it's going to go past the edge of that doorway. But for right now, let's just knock it back without trying to go too much into that. And knock that back, get that as much as you can, and then we're going to come back in and with cleaning it out with the paint thinner, getting it damp like we did before, we're going to come back in and give a nice clean cut to that. So again, just hit this, try to knock the paint in here and in there. Keep it in as much as possible until you get it mixed in fairly decent. Then lightly hit the whole thing to give it a nice even tone. So I'm hitting a little bit on this side and a little bit bringing it back there, and that's basically what I'm doing. Up top, same thing. Trying to keep the paint mostly inside that doorway. I don't want it out just yet until I actually hit it. Now I got a pretty good head start. Now I'm going to hit it with the whole brush to get a nice even tone. And when I do, again, it's very lightly. Okay. Now again, take your big brush, clean this out good. Make sure you don't have any paint in it. You're gonna take your paper towel and get it pretty well dried out. It'll be a little bit damp. Then just come in and just cut right at the edge where you want it to be sharp. And you can see how that's cutting it right down there. Take out the rest up here, and if you start getting pick up paint, clean it out a little bit, dry it off, get it damp, come back in again. Basically, it's like sculpting in a way. You're sculpting this painting to come out just the way that you want it. Now, let's start working on the steps here. Now the steps, what we're going to do is, because here's the doorway and it's shiny and we have a bright part here. So the steps, what we're going to do is, again, we're not going to do the dark parts. These steps are supposed to be more or less transparent. So we're not going to do the dark shade on this, just a light shade. But when we're hitting the light shade, because the light's hitting here, it's going to be brighter with the light shining down and fade out darker as it goes across. So when we're laying down the paint, we're going to be starting here, putting down white, dragging it out, putting down white, dragging it out here. That'll give us a bright spot here, and it fades out to nothing on the edges. Okay, so grab your 3/4 inch brush, grab some liquid, get it on there, not too wet, but wet enough, and then grab some white. You don't want too much on there, but we do want enough because we're going to be grabbing it and stretching it across. After a few times, you'll get to know just how much paint to put down. That'll just take practice. Okay. So now again, here's our light source right in the center. We're going to hit this area right here. It's our first step, and just drag it until we run out of paint. Now, what I usually do is, to give it a head start too, is sometimes if I have too much paint on, I'll hit it, and as I pull it across here, I don't keep the same pressure. What I do is I hit down hard, and then as I start coming out, I give it less and less pressure, the brush coming off of the canvas, and that'll also fade it, which is what I just did here. Then again, come back in, grab some more paint, and now we're going to come back in here. We're going to grab from that same light source right down the center. We're going to grab, and then we're going to grab it and pull it out this way. Okay, You do the same thing for the next step. And don't worry too much if it's like this is a little shaky at this point, because we're going to come back in and cut just like we did the edge of the door to make these steps nice and square. So we come up to the next one. We have a dark area. We grab from this area, pull it all the way across. Grab some more white paint. Roll liquid if we need it. And come back and do the same thing on this side. We grab it from the center and just pull it all the way across. I'm going to do that for just all the steps, same principle. Now again, as we're going up, the steps are coming up, which is further away. This white area is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller steps. So now what we need to do is to make this smooth from one end to the other. And that's again for the big brush. Clean it off, make sure we don't have paint on the brush. We want it fairly dry and clean. And we're going to be going this way smoothing it out and that way smoothing it out. Now remember what I told you before. When you're using this brush, if you apply just a little bit of pressure, you keep your detail and you just knock it back a little bit. The more pressure you hit and the more you stay in that one area, the more you're going to knock it back. Well, that's the principle we're going to be using right here. We want to keep this kind of sharp, but we want this white to be fading out to nothing at the end. So as we get out to the end, we're going to be hitting it harder and harder so that we have it white here and fading out to nothing in the ends. And again, just lightly go back and forth for right now to get a good head start on this thing. And you can see how that's starting to blend and take effect already. Okay, a little bit back and forth just to get a blend going. Again, you don't want to hit it too hard. You don't want to blend everything back into a white area. You want to keep that dark area, even though we're going to cut in here. Okay. Now as we're doing this, now we're going to grab some of this white here and we're going to start dragging it out so that it fades. Try to keep away from the center. We want that shiny, but we want to start grabbing this out. And if it starts blending in too much, one on top of the other, don't worry about it. We are going to come back in and cut. Do the same thing for the other side. We're going to hit over here. We're going to try to blend this out. And we're going to put a little bit more pressure to get that smooth and move that paint right off the canvas. As you can see, the more I'm in one area, it's starting to knock it back to where it fades out to nothing. That's exactly what we want. Okay, so now we've got some steps going here. Now what we want to do is get your 3/4 inch brush, clean it out. We don't want any white paint because we're going to cut right now. We want to take paint off. We don't want to add any on. So we need it cleaned out really good. And again, take your paper towel. You don't want it wet. We want it damp. And now what we're going to do is we're going to come in and go right along that edge and get a nice clean cut. I'm going to do the same thing for the top part of it. Again, every now and then clean off your brush, get it damp out again because we're taking paint away. You start getting it, you can see different areas, like this part here, this worked out fairly well, that's working out well. This one here, it's got messed up on here. Just come back in, clean out your brush, go back in. Make sure it's dry because you don't want to take paint away, and lightly hit this. You can grab some of that white and just pull it right across to clean up that edge. Back in and smooth it out again, get it even, knock it back. And now come back and cut that area again. Smooth this area out. Now you can come back at this at any point and rework that once that's dry. If you can come back in and hit white back on top of that and pull it out if you want to grab a little bit longer or a little bit brighter in certain areas. But that's basically the principle of it. Okay, so now that we have this laid in, let this dry, and tomorrow what we'll do is I'll show you how to put Payne's Gray on this door, and we'll give this doorway a glow. So this is all that we're going to do today, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Welcome back to day 3. Even though it's taken us 3 days to do the painting, you can see it's only actually the painting itself is only a couple hours at the most to do something like this. Today what we're going to do is we're going to hit some white on this, which will brighten this up a little bit more, but we're going to make a glow come out of here, just like the light was coming from behind over here and it was just shining right out. So we're going to give a glow on this here, and we're also going to darken this door down to make it look like a door swinging open.
and probably hit a little bit of Payne's gray on the bottom parts of these steps to give them a little bit more definition. After we're done with that, what we'll do is we'll probably pop this wing a little bit more white. As you can see, it's almost faded out to give more distinction to that. And then I'll show you how you can also come back in once the painting is dry with the liquid and actually hit the tops of the clouds and pop them a little bit too. First thing we need to do is to grab your 3/4 inch flat brush, grab a little bit of liquid, and what we're going to do is we're going to coat on the edge of this door and the door itself. We need that wet so when we put the white paint down, we can blend this out like we did with the clouds, because right now the painting is dry. And if we put dry paint on that, it'll be really hard to move that paint. This will make it move easier onto the canvas. So just take your liquid and just put it on. Give it probably a couple of inches around the doorway, because that's where we're going to be blending it out. And you don't want a lot. You want to get it wet, but you don't want a lot of liquid on there. Okay, like I say, give it about 2 inches all the way around, and that should give us what we want. Okay, get it pretty well even all the way out. Okay, dry off your brush a little bit. We don't want it real wet at this point. We've already got it wet on here with the liquid, so if we put wet paint on top of that, it's going to be way too wet to blend out smoothly. So dry your brush off a little bit. And now just come back in. We're going to grab some white paint. Again, we don't need a lot, but you want to get some on here. So now let's go back. Let's just hit the door first. And just kind of cover the door roughly, which will pop that a little bit whiter. Okay. Okay, if you're feeling when you're painting on this, the liquid you lay down, if you didn't put enough liquid, as you're putting the paint down, you'll feel it kind of pulling and dragging. That means you need a little bit more liquid on there. So you might grab a little bit more liquid to grab with the white. Again, if it's going nice and smooth, then don't grab the liquid, you've got enough. But if not, then you'll need to come back and grab a little liquid, because you want the paint to be able to blend and smooth. Okay. So now we're going to grab on the outside here, and you can see how thin it is. We don't want it too thick, but we want some paint on here. So you want something about like that. Okay, once that's on, grab your 3-inch dry and cleaned regular house painting brush, and we're just going to knock that back. Now as you get to the edge, so you can see a distinction edge, we don't want that. So grab that edge and just keep hitting that until you fade that out. Same thing with the top part here. And then knock it back. And now we've got like a glow from the door opening up. It's actually a glow coming out, almost like a neon effect. Now for the steps that are here, now that it's dry, we can see, okay, it would be nice if we had a little bit brighter white on these steps here. Now is the perfect time to do this. Come back in with your 3/4 inch, grab a little bit of liquid and a little bit of your white paint. And then we're going to go over the same area that we went before. We're just going to hit it, drag it out, and don't go all the way out to the ends this time, just in the center. We just want a little bit more pop to the white on where the door is shining through onto the steps. So then grab some of that, come over a little bit, and again, don't go all the way out, just grab it a little bit, and do that for all the steps. Just kind of follow what you already have laid down. We're just going over it and popping it just a little bit. Now again, when you're laying this down, whether it's steps, and the same principle works for light on water, you know, if there's a light shining on over some waterways that are rolling in, always be aware of where your light source is. Like right now, our light source is here. So we want to start here and move out that way so that we have a center right over where the door is, and it'll fade out to nothing on the sides. And I'm going to do the same thing for that. Just a little bit. We don't want it white all the way across. Just give it an appearance of a shine that's on those clean steps. And now we're going to go the same thing up here. And once we have that laid in, okay, we grab our 3-inch regular house painting brush, and we're going to go back and forth to smooth that out a little bit, and then we're going to knock the edges down real hard so they fade out right into nothing on both sides over here. So let's first go back and forth this way to smooth out what we've got going. Again, real light pressure, just to get it smoothed out. And you don't want to do this too much or you'll take away the white paint we've already just laid down. So you want this here, and then at the edges where you can see it's rough and starts, now you want to start fading that out more, just like we did with the edge here. You want to just grab some of that, kind of fade that out all the way to the end here. And the same thing with that side. Now you can come back on the edges, not in the center, but let's go on the edges to feather them out a little bit more. And you can see how it's making a nice transition from bright down to nothing again. And now you can see where it's looking like it's really shining right on the steps up here, like we got real shiny steps. Okay, now let's go to the door. Now we're not going to use white. What we're going to use is some of the Payne's Gray that we have here. Now Payne's Gray is, like I say, is a marvelous color because unlike black, although it looks like black, Payne's Gray is a very transparent black. So it'll take on whatever color is underneath it. Right now we have blue and everything is blue, so you won't see too much of a difference. But if you were working with, let's say, a red door on a blue sky with some green grass back here, and you hit over a shadow casting over all three, you would see that it would darken the red to a dark red, the green to a dark green. It's a marvelous color for any kind of shadows. And the reason is because it is transparent, it lets some of that other color shine through with it. Now take your 3/4 inch flat brush again and let's clean that out, get rid of the white. Dry it off a little bit. Now let's grab some liquid here. Again, not too much. And if you feel it's too watery, that means you still have some more, you have some of that paint thinner left on, a little too much paint thinner left on. Dry your brush off a little bit more and then grab some of the liquid. Now let's just coat the door itself. Now we're not going to go outside the door this time, just inside the door. And we'll coat it, and again, not too much of this, just a little bit to wet that down when we put on the Payne's Gray. Okay, now let's grab a little of the Payne's Gray, and again, not too much. We want to give a tint. We don't want to cover it up. So grab some of your Payne's Gray, and then just come right on down. Now again, see how it's getting a little too thick here? Then just keep moving through the whole area you're going to paint until your brush starts running out of paint, and then grab some more of that where it's too thick and blend that out. Try to keep within the door. If you don't make it, that's okay. We're going to come back and cut out of that just like we did yesterday with the white part on here. Just try not to go into the white, because then that's going to give us a problem when we start smoothing. So keep this fairly straight, right where we're coming to the door part. But over here you can get a little bit looser. And again, just take your brush and just keep moving paint back and forth till you get it pretty well even all the way across. It's not, too much paint up here and not enough down there. Because of the liquid that's behind it, we can move the paint on here real easy. And just work your way all the way right out to the edge of the door. You want it to be a little bit darker here than the background over here, but you want most of that Payne's Gray on this edge of the door. So just move it with your brush back and forth. Just kind of like that. Okay, now once we have that laid in, let's grab our big brush again. Make sure that it's clean so we don't have any of that white that we just moved up here. Well, you can do that with a paper towel, or like I'm using a towel here, just to get that paint off the very edge of the brush so it's clean. Now we're going to come back and we're going to blend this out. Now when we're doing that, make sure that you don't blend too much back and forth. Like over here, we were free to do that. There was nothing here. Now we've got white here we don't want to disturb because it's still wet. So when we're blending, we're going to try to just blend it out this way without going over and hitting into that white area. And again, just real light. Just a light touch here. Okay, now as we're getting toward the end here, you can hit a little bit harder to blend that in pretty good. And now you can see how the door is a little bit darker. It's giving the appearance of it opening up, and it also separates it from the background. Now come back in with your 3/4 inch brush, clean it off. And now we're going to cut off the edges where we may have blurred some of that Payne's Gray into this side. We want to keep a sharp edge for the door, a distinction between the door and that background. So clean off your brush, make sure that you have it dry. We want it damp. We don't want it too wet, or you'll get a bead edge on here, and we don't want that. We want it to be smooth. Okay, now come back in and just cut right up along the doorway on the top. Again, clean it every time you do that, so you don't, because you're going to be picking up some of that Payne's Gray up here. You want to keep it clean. You want to take Payne's Gray out. So come in, we just grab the edge here, all the way down, And the same thing on this back side. All the way down, nice sharp edge. And the same thing with the bottom part here. Okay. Alright, now we're going to take our detail brush, which is just a small brush here, and we're going to hit the very edge of the door. And we're going to make that a little bit darker than we are at the rest of the door here. So we're going to grab some more Payne's Gray, but we want more of that Payne's Gray at this point. And we just want to hit the edge of the door just to give, because the door is opening up, we're seeing that edge, and we want that a little bit darker than the light side of the door. So again, grab a little bit of your Payne's Gray, maybe a little bit of liquid. You don't want it too wet at this point, because we're not going to blend this, we're just going to lay it in. And right here at the edge of the door, we're just going to come in and just put an edge down here. Now if it's getting too dark, if you lay down too much Payne's Gray, you can mix this with the regular color. Now the colors that we use up on top here, we had cerulean blue, which blended into the Prussian blue. So most of this up on top here should be the cerulean blue. So you can take some of that Payne's Gray, grab some of your cerulean, just a little bit of it, and move it in along with it. Now we're mixing both of those together. It'll lighten up this part of it here. So we still have a darker color, but it's not real dark like straight Payne's Gray. And just continue to draw that down. Grab a little liquid to make it smoother if you need to. Just keep continuing all the way down till we get to the edge of the door. Now a little thing that'll help you out, you probably noticed throughout this painting, I have this stick here. Now, they call this a maul stick. Generally, a lot of artists, what they do is they have a maul stick, which is just a stick, and they lean it up against the painting, and it keeps their hand off of the painting, because a lot of times with the oil paints, you're painting wet on wet, we're not. But it keeps your hand off the painting, but it also gives you a nice straight edge. So like when I'm doing this here, see, I can keep my pole straight, and then I can just follow right down, and it gives, as long as my hand is controlled straight, it'll just give me a perfectly straight line. because if you do it freehand, your hand's always going to shake a little bit. This will help steady your hand and give you a nice straight edge coming all the way down. Okay, once we're done with that, let's clean off our brush. Okay, let's go back to, we can go with the 3/4 inch, or let's even go with a little bit smaller brush. Let's go with the 1/4 inch flat. Okay, let's grab a little bit of liquid. And we're going to grab just the Payne's Gray, not the blue, just the Payne's Gray. You don't want much, we just want a little bit of it here, just to give a little tint. And what we're going to do is we're going to tint the back side of these steps to give a little bit more pop to where the steps actually are breaking up from the clouds themselves. So we're going to follow our line up here, and again, just go from one edge to the other. We still want to do the same thing, so go from here to there, from here to here, giving the focal point right here, and as it goes out to the edge, it blends out. That'll give the appearance that these steps are actually, the clouds are actually coming over the steps and they're blending into each other to where they're disappearing. So just grab a little bit and just move it out to the end. And then grab this part and come back over here. And just blend it back and forth. We don't want it, again, we don't want this opaque. We want it kind of transparent. So you don't want a lot of it. And then as you're coming off to the edge, clean off your brush so it's pretty much empty and dry. And then just start grabbing your ends and make them just fade out to nothing out here. You want to leave this darker part up here, but you want it to fade out to nothing here. Grab a little of that paint if you need to, and just move it on out, and just go right over that cloud. That gives us a little bit sharper edge right on this part here. This really gives a nice sharp edge to the lighting that's hitting here. Grab a little bit more, and we're not going to go all the way up with it because we're using very little Payne's Gray, and in reality, it would be darker up front and would fade out to nothing in the back. So we're going to do a couple of steps and then that'll be it. Okay, same thing with this one here. Grab a little Payne's Gray just to darken that a hair in the center. Okay, then once we have that, then just start moving that out to the end. If your brush is too wet or too much paint, again, clean it off a little bit, and then just grab, and we're just going to where it's nothing to the end. We're just fading right out to the end over here. And clean your brush off, come back and do the same thing with this side. And you're able to do this without much effort simply because we're using the liquid. The liquid keeps everything nice and smooth. If you went with just dry paint without the liquid, even with Payne's Gray, and tried to move this, you would be able to lay it down, it would be transparent, but to try to get it to be smooth out to the end, to fade to nothing like these are, you would have a difficult time with it. So again, just do the next step up. There's some liquid, a little bit of Payne's Gray. Let's hit this step. Again, lay it in this part first, right below where the light's shining in. And then just work your way right out to the end, to where it fades into nothing. Same thing with this side here. Now if you get to an area, if you will lay down and you have too much Payne's Gray here, and you're trying to let it fade out and it's going way out too much because there's too much paint, just take a paper towel and just damp on it, just put your, take the paper towel and just take off the paint that you don't want, and then just continue blending it, and then you'll be fine with that as well. We're going to go with just one more, and not a whole lot, right up in this area. Just real light tint. And now that's given us a little bit more depth, as you say. Now one more thing I want to show. Let's go and hit this wing here a little bit to pop that away from the clouds that we have going. And this again will be very easy. We just take a 3/4 inch brush, clean it off a bit, make sure we don't have any Payne's gray in there. Grab a little bit of liquid, and we're going to hit with some white. Now this will be easier than when we had to lay it down the first time, because we had to make sure everything was set up exactly. Now we have a guideline to go by rather than just a pencil line, and we can just follow that line and just start adding in some paint. You're just going over it, just to pop it a little bit more. And when we're done, we are going to smooth it, because we want this whole thing to be one nice smooth color, rather than like right now, when you're putting the paint down, you can see it's kind of scratchy and blotchy. We don't want that. And we'll get rid of that again with a 3-inch brush. But as you can see, like in the picture that we're using, the edge of the wings is whiter, and they start getting into a darker area up in here. So we're going to lay down the white in here, and we're going to just fade it out like we faded out from this light part down to nothing here. We're going to do the same thing with the wings. So for right now, let's just get the edges white with some white paint and liquid. And again, make sure you don't put too much paint down, because when you start moving that paint across and blending it out, if you have too much, you won't be able to blend it out smooth over here. You'll have to take some paint off before you can actually do that. So it's better to have a little less, and that way there you can always add more if you want to, rather than too much and have to fight and try to take it all out. Okay, we got a pretty good start on that. Now let's move down. After a while, with practice on this, you'll start to get used to just what kind of mixture between paint and liquid to apply to get what effect you want. Sometimes you want a little bit more paint than liquid when you're making it more opaque, like we did with this door here, and sometimes you want it thinner when you're just giving a little glow. And after a while, you'll get used to that, and you can actually feel it on your brush, just how wet it is or how dry it is, according to how much liquid you have in. Okay. That's enough. We don't want to, again, we've got some nice clouds back here. We don't want to take away from the clouds, but we want to make more of a distinction on the edge of this wing against here, so when you look at it, you see the wing right away. And that's the whole beauty of this with the liquid, is you're showing, like with this angel, you're showing the wings. So you're looking at it and you go, oh, it's an angel, but because you can see the background coming through, it appears as a transparent angel. And everybody go, oh, how did you do that? And you can tell them your secret is liquid. We get a good head start. Now let's take our big brush, make Make sure again that it's nice and clean. And now we're just going to knock that back, just like we did the first time. And again, once we want to keep an edge on here, so you don't want to knock too much on this edge part. You want to get everything on an even tone, but you don't want to knock it back too much. We want that edged. But once you get that edge going in there, then from this part on, now you can hit a little bit harder to get a nice blend going from that edge into nothing. There, now we've popped that wing just a little bit more. And you can do that throughout the angel. If you want to, to bring the robe out a little bit more, you can hit that. Actually, even if you went with a straight white and made this opaque white on the robe and on the face, as long as you just hit the highlights and you don't touch the shadow part, it's still going to give the appearance of the transparency of it because you're not hitting the shadow. Now, let me show you one other little trick that you can use. Let me lower this a bit. Okay, you can see where this is the shadow part of our wing. And we have the clouds showing through. And that gives us the appearance of a transparent angel. Okay, if you wanted to pop that a little bit more, like this right here, we want a little bit darker because it's just not popping enough. But we don't want to come back with white because that'll start taking away the clouds here. You go back in just like we did with the door here. Go with your Payne's Gray, hit the Payne's Gray on this side, and it'll still let the background shine through. You'll still see the cloud formation, but it'll darken it a little bit, as long as you don't use too much. That's the whole key to this. So let's go back just to show you. And let's clean off our 3/4 inch flat brush. Get that clean, get the white off. Clean it off pretty good. Dry it off pretty good. And now just like we did with the door, we're going to grab some liquid, a little bit of Payne's Gray, and put it into this darker area over here of the dark wing where it's in the shadow. And again, not too much. You want the liquid, that'll make it move, but you don't want too much Payne's Gray where it's going to take away from that cloud formation that's in there. And again, like I say, if you have too much, like right now, that's a little too dark for what I want, that's fine, because the liquid, we can take that and just keep moving it. Just don't grab any more liquid, and as we're going up, we're getting thinner and thinner, grab some of this and move it on the outside. Again, follow your wing, the edge of the angel, and just move it back and forth. Now again, we have a white part here, and the rest of this is in the shadow. We can just continue with that, and just move it around, just in the dark areas here, just where the shadow part is. But keep it real thin, that way there we're still letting the cloud show through, but we're giving a little bit more edge to the shadowness of this, the wing. Okay, you might want to take just a little, if you start running out, where you like this tone here, but you're running out of paint, just grab a little bit more. And we just hit this area up in here with that. Okay, now if you get a part like, say this area, say this area right here. If you get a part like this, where you want the wing to be darkened, but you want this to be faded. You don't want to show that dark side over here. And you've already put some of the Payne's Gray down. Just again, you can take a paper towel, because you have the liquid in here. It's very movable, very flexible. just come in with your paper towel, clean paper towel, and just rub on it like that, and you'll take it right out. Again, just get another clean area of the towel, and you just rub it a little bit, and it'll take it right out of there. Because you're working wet on dry now, you can do that. Okay, once we've got that down, again, make sure your brush is clean, your 3-inch regular house brush, and then just come back and knock that back and forth. You blend that out. Again, making sure that you're not taking the edge off of the darkness from the light. That's what the reason we went with this, is to make that distinction a little better. So just hit a little bit, and then just hit a little bit harder till you get it blended to where you want it. Now keep in mind, just like we cut the white off of here. Remember yesterday when we laid this white down and we didn't have a straight line, or we just didn't get enough, and we came back and we cut that edge with just the flat brush and paint thinner and nothing else, just to get the paint off of there. It was actually sculpting, if you remember what I was talking about yesterday. Remember, anything that you're doing at this point, when you're laying this down, you can sculpt in whatever piece you want. In other words, like this part of the angel here. Now I avoided that, but let's just say that I took some of this Payne's gray and darkened this whole wing down, and I went over that. And I've got it smoothed out. I'm going, oh, I don't want to go back in there and have to take everything out. All you can do is just come back in with a smaller brush, clean it off with your turpentine, and just come in and just take that paint out of there. You're basically sculpting, and it'll pop that white back in without disturbing the nice blend that you just put down as a shadow. And that's pretty much about it. So I hope you enjoyed the lesson, and now you know how to make transparent angels or anything in that nature. Just do one side, either just the dark side or just the light side, and let the other part shine through. Until next time, I'm Danny Halbom. I hope to see you again.